Let's talk about now your study. Heat acclimation improves exercise performance. What were you trying to figure out? What was the purpose of this study?
Right. So I don't want to go too long to tell the history of this, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. I was working with an athlete, a runner, a marathoner named Dathan Ritzenheim, and he was training and preparing for the Beijing Olympics. And at the time, we thought the Beijing Olympics could potentially be the hottest marathon on record. And now we've got Japan, which may also be may break that record. And so, when you're working with this level of athlete, they're absolute thoroughbreds. And so I was really worried about doing anything that would decrease his performance, bringing him into our lab, into our chamber, and worked very closely with his coaches. And but what we're concerned about is let's say we did get him really prepared for heat acclimation. And then we find out that through maybe hemodilution or some other factors that might play in, that his performance actually went down a little bit. I would have done a terrible job as an exercise physiologist. I would have been very disappointed because this person spent his entire life getting ready for these moments, right? So we really wanted to see if we heat acclimate somebody, will we see an improved performance? I didn't think so. Would we see no change in performance but perform better in the heat? Absolutely. Or would we see a decrease in performance? We really want to try and nail that down. So that was a question we're trying to get at. If you look at the physiology, there's reasons why you think there might be a decrease in performance in a cool weather after heat acclimation. There could be no change or there could be an improvement. And that's what we were going after.
So how did you design this study to figure it out?
Yeah, so we used CYCLIST partly because we can quantify so well the workload that they're doing, and within an environment we can do the time trials, for instance, 1 hour time trials to try and get performance variables, as well as we can do it in the lab and get really good physiology data. At the end of the day, I'm an exercise physiologist, but I'm also an integrative cardiovascular physiologist, so I love looking at mechanisms. I want to really understand things at a deep level. So we had to do it in our chamber. We recruited a lot of really good cyclists, so I think we only had one Cat 3, everyone else was Cat 1 or Cat 2. We had a mixture of men and women. We got a little more men than women. We wanted to have a mix, but unfortunately couldn't find enough women of that caliber who were there. All the men were over, VO2 max was over 65, and all the women were about 58 to 65. So we're talking good cyclists, right? They weren't elite, but they were very good, couple people that could be at the national level. We then designed the study in a way to try and really look at can we improve can we improve performance in cool environments, and can we improve performance in hot environments? So we used a whole battery of tests before any kind of intervention. We then had the intervention, which had 2 groups, and they're randomly assigned to either the heat acclimation group or the cool control. And then we did the whole battery of tests afterwards. And the intervention was 10 days, so 5 days, the weekends off, 5 days. One of the key components that we want to do is make sure that people weren't just coming in and just riding for us and quitting their training. The study did take a whole year, and good thing in Eugene, Oregon, where I am, the cycling races are year round. You go right from road racing to the cyclocross racing, and that goes all through winter, and they just kind of circle back around. So everyone was training throughout the year, and we wanted them to keep their intensity going. So one of the key components that we really said is that if someone comes in and just rides slower for us in the heat, we'll probably see a decrease in performance. Same thing working with the marathoners. We really wanted to separate out adding the heat, so added heat benefit, from the high intensity, the key workouts, and worked with the coaches very carefully to make sure, all right, what are the key workouts they're doing per week? Let's make sure they'll stay in place, make sure they're doing in the best ideal cool temperatures, and then add the heat on top of that.
So did you match this?
Go ahead, Chad.
Did you match this from the experimental group to the control group, that you had one athlete performing at this high of a level and doing this training load, to the control doing a similar high performance level with a similar training load? Yes.
Yep. So all the athletes were on the same 2 clubs that we pulled from. And so they were mostly training together. And so we made sure that we had a good mixture from each group. We weren't like one club. And so, then we had them all write diaries and spoke to coaches and all that kind of stuff to make sure that they were maintaining those high levels of intensity, and the long, hard work, 2, 3, 4, 5 hour rides were still in place as well.
So where did you space the heat adaptation compared to the intense workouts?
Right.
Were they afterwards, same day?
Yeah. So there was what kind of happens in the kind of situation is sometimes athletes did shift stuff a little bit. We would always want to make sure that any heat acclimation we're doing was after an intense workout. So if you're going to do heat acclimation during the morning and then do an intense workout afterwards, you're going to be fatigued, a little more tired. You've already spent, in our case, an hour and a half on the bike in the heat. So we really made sure we had them separate as much as we could. So we had 5 days where they did the heat acclimation, the weekend off. A lot of them were racing over that weekend, and then 5 days again. And again, that was interspersed throughout the year. And we worked with them to try and find the best time as well for their schedule. If they had a really big event, we didn't want to be messing with them because that's just not fair to them. But that was kind of the goal.
And then, so the control group also did the same extra volume, but just not in a hot room. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yep. So they did it in the 13 degrees C, which is about 50 degree room. We had fans for both groups. And they did, and this is one of the key components that we really debated about how we're going to do this and if we made the right choice or not. In the end, we made a choice, whether it was the best choice or not, and that is we had them match the actual loads they're doing on the bike. So we had them working at 50% of VO2 max at that workload, whether they're in the heat or in the cool condition, the control condition. And what that meant is that those in the heat were at a higher heart rate. So we matched the physical loads. And I was doing that because at the time I was really thinking, all right, the biggest stress for these individuals is going to be the load we're placing on their legs. And they're going to feel the biggest fatigue for the legs. They're all highly trained at that point. They're all within season. And so they're all very strong cardiovascular wise. So we thought, let's make sure we don't have like one group doing a lower workload in the chamber, even though their heart rate will be higher. Right. And that's become a big area of debate and actually one of the more interesting things that came out of the study that we didn't actually plan for.
And you kept it at 50% VO2 max because you felt that wouldn't confound these findings with an influence of actual adaptation to the training, to that particular training.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. We put a lot of thought into that as well. We want to have a big enough stimulus where they're going to get their body temperature up and be hot. But in general, if you tell, an athlete, you're going to spend an extra, hour and a half spinning and you can adapt your training a little bit if need be, but you spend an extra hour and a half spinning at 50% of your max watts or your peak watts, then most of them are fine. They're like, oh, that sounds fine. I can do that easily. Sure. No problem. It's not going to change anything. And that value has been shown before to not really improve performance in athletes. Right. If you take an untrained person, have them doing that, of course, they're going to adapt and get stronger. But in a trained athlete, you won't see any real increase over 2 weeks.
And that, for all the people that understand FTP, that's an aerobic pace, 70% FTP, 65% FTP, correct?
Right. Yep.
Right around there. Cool. Okay. So then how did you actually, so they you get the people, they do some tests. Let's talk about how you tested them before they even did the controls or the worked out in the heat. Intervention. Sorry. Thank you.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we did a battery of tests. So we really wanted to look at a number of performance variables and some physiological variables. So the main things we were looking at were VO2 max, seeing if we could improve or change VO2 max. We wanted to look at lactate threshold. That was the kind of, at that time, people weren't really talking that much about FTP and critical power and other things. So we focused on lactate threshold as a physiological measurement that we can actually make. And then we had a 1 hour time trial, and we're looking at that as well. We did some extra stuff that's not in the paper. We looked at some skin blood flow and temperature regulation markers, and we looked at some leg blood flow measurements through a single leg kicking device. We don't talk about all those because we haven't, they're not as relevant to the performance side of things, but we had a pretty big battery of tests that we did before and then afterwards. And the important part really about the testing we did is we did it once in a cool environment and once in a hot environment. And so every test we did, performance variable was in those two environments, and we randomized across subjects which was first and which was second. For any athlete, post-testing, we kept the order the same as we did before, right? So they did heat first and then cool. They do heat first and then cool. Someone cool first, then heat, then we kept it the same that way. But it was randomized across the subjects.
So the VO2 max test, I think that's pretty standard, what people have seen, where you put the mask on, you do I think I read that it was a 20-watt step test, right, and then you measure the gas exchange. Lactic threshold, I'm guessing, is that also stepped, but with blood?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a little different. It's a separate test. So some people try and mix them at the same time, but you're usually not going to get the best data doing that. So we had another step test. We have longer steps between And once we got a clear increase in the lactate that we measured, then we would stop them. So we didn't make it a max test at the end.
You only went up 1 millimole, right?
Right.
1 millimole from baseline. Yeah. So you weren't measuring what we term as lactate threshold, which is typically maximal lactate steady state. You were just looking for a 1 millimole increase over baseline.
Right. And we actually took them a little farther than that. And we have a paper that looked at different ways to look at a lactate threshold, different ways to calculate it. There's the 4 millimole total, 1 mil step. There's a inflection point work we've done. So we looked at all those different variables, but for this paper, and they all changed similarly, so it wasn't anything really remarkable there. But we kind of used what at the time was probably the most standard approach, I think.
And then the time trial performance. This is brutal. Can you describe what you made people do?
Well, so it was a 1 hour time trial, and so we basically they didn't have any really feedback for them, other than I think we gave them distance, and then we had them just do a 1 hour time trial, and we did it either in a cool condition or a hot condition, and they did that both times, both before and after. Some of the athletes really, the ones who are strong at time trials, actually kind of liked it, and the ones that don't hated it. Sprinters and others like that just, of course, hate time trials. I will say that one thing that we could have done better, all the people had experience with time trials, so we felt good about that. But, we subsequently done some work looking at different histamine blockers and some work by Matt Ely, and he did a really good job making sure people did 4 time trials, just practicing, just getting used to it and making sure that we could do really consistent variables. And then we added the control and experimental conditions. This one we kind of trusted, they're really good cyclists, are going to do it. But there was some pacing that we saw that happened between pre and post changes. In the heat in the first one, some of the athletes went out pretty fast and they didn't realize how hot they're going to get. And so that was interesting. But we felt like at least in the cool condition, which our real question was, we got real consistent data in the control group on that.
And that time trial performance, it was on an ergometer. So people are used to erg mode if you're a cyclist, and they were just hitting intensity up or down, right? And then changing the wattage. Is that what it was?
Yes. Yeah.
They couldn't see the wattage.
Right. No. Yeah. We wanted them to just be able to just go and use the absolute, we didn't want them getting any cues. And so it's all just in their head, how hard they're going to work and how hard they're going to push. And they just had the time, how much longer they had to do.
And then how did you measure their core body temperature? Because I saw that in the paper too. This is crazy.
Yeah. So this is something that always gets a lot of debate. We've used the industrial pills in the past, and some people like those, but those are at a minimum $45 per pill. And sometimes they don't work that well. So we use a classic way, which is a rectal temperature. And the way I explain this to athletes who come through, and the way I explain it to any cyclist, God or evolution or whoever gave us this wonderful bum crack. And it was designed specifically so you can ride a bike with a rectal probe. So we're basically just using human evolution to put some real good science forward.
The crazy part is I read that it was 5 centimeters, which to me seems like, was it 10 centimeters? How much was it? 10 centimeters.
Yeah.
10 centimeters, which seems like a lot. I don't know.
It does. Yeah. It's actually, the funny thing is, it's, and I think women in general are more comfortable with their bodies than men are. And so the women never bat an eye really about rectal probes. The other than there's some embarrassment, I think, walk around, here's my rectal probe, and it's coming out your shorts. But the men had a little harder time with it, I think, which men in general not as comfortable with our bodies. And you tell them how far it needs to go, and you show them, and they're like, but honestly, once you're sliding it in, there's a little bulb that has to go through to help hold it in place, has to go through the anal sphincter. It's not bad. And if you've ever done esophageal, we do esophageal temperature as well. That goes up the nose, down the throat, down the, and that into the esophagus. That's miserable. You're gagging, reflex, all that kind of stuff. But the rectal probe is, once you're moving, it's not bad.
How did you control for things like what if they had a bunch of caffeine that day or something like that could increase their performance?
Yeah, we made sure they kept food diaries, and they followed them every single day. I'm sure you're probably somewhat familiar with this from the athletes you speak to, but the majority of them are pretty regimented what they do, especially those who are training for big events. They're pretty good about, start telling them to document things. they're fine doing that. They pretty much have a certain amount of foods that don't bother them. They eat at certain times. We try to have them not have any caffeine on the testing days. And, a big debate in my field and something I have some ideas that'd be kind of fun to do a study on is to take regular caffeine drinkers and have them not have caffeine for a day and see how their physiology changes, because there will be some changes. But I think once people are going in the lab, that kind of goes by the wayside. No one complained of headaches or other things. But we did try and make sure the food, the diet, the exercise, everything they did in any pre or post testing was identical, the same.
That's awesome. So what were the results?
Yeah, so the main thing that we saw is that there are two parts to it. One is we knew or really suspected we see real improvements in the performance of variables in the hot condition, meaning heat acclimation worked. So heat acclimation worked very well. So improvements in the heat, all the heat tests in the experimental group, control group, we saw no changes. But what's surprising is we saw VO2 max increase, lactate threshold improve, and improved time top performance in the cooler condition. And they were on the order across subjects about 2 to 7 or 8% increases, which was, and it wasn't 100% everybody, but it was pretty close. We published our individual data so people can see who the true responders and non-responders are. And almost nearly every athlete improved in the cool weather performance.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.
If you think I have better hair than Jonathan, give it a thumbs up. If not, leave a comment.
My hair is better than his.